Welcome to Raising a Beautiful Mind, the podcast where we have real conversations about youth mental health to empower families and transform systems. Okay, welcome back. My name is Jen, and I am thrilled to have you here at Raising a Beautiful Mind, the podcast. Today, I just want to talk about one of the, I think, most prevalent topics throughout the mental health community, especially for parents of kids that have some complex needs. Behavior. I think behavior is one of those things that can be an energy drain. It can be exhausting. And I think as parents, no matter how good we are, it seems to continue to rear its head. I think for me as a parent, one of the things that was the most eye-opening is when I learned what was really going on. So as a professional, I have worked for decades with kids that had severe behaviors and emotional, traumas or mental health issues, all of the above. And when I'm wearing my professional hat, I can look at things in a way that when I'm wearing my parent hat, I can't. And part of that has to do with how our brains work too, right? So our brains start developing from the back and they work their way to the front as we age. About the time we're about 25, 26, 27, the front of our brains are finally fully developed. Although some people would say that it can even take a little bit longer. The front of our brains are like our prefrontal cortex is responsible for things like executive functioning. So memory, decision-making, rational thought, impulsivity, all of the things that we also need to be really successful, as adults, to be able to rationally think and make good decisions and think about, problem solve, all of those things. The problem is that when our anxiety goes up, when we're dealing with behaviors, when we feel like we're in, this rush to get our kids resources, we also turn on our survival brains, and that goes more to the back of our brains. And then our front brain, all those things I just talked about, so the rational thought and the decision making, they shut off. Because when we're in survival mode, our emotional brain takes over as a natural, biological reaction to stress or to danger. So it's like if you went out into a forest and you saw a bear, your brain, because it's wired to keep you okay and safe, it goes, bear, shuts off the rational decision making because you don't want to sit there and go, should I leave because of this bear? Let me wait. Let's do a SWOT analysis on it, right? You want to hightail it the heck out of there. And so your survival brain, your primitive brain allows you to do that. It gets you out of there and then things calm down and you're relaxed again and you can go back to activating the front of the brain. I would say that the problem for a lot of us on this journey is sometimes that activation is more often than not. And so this can be a very traumatic experience for us as parents, especially when we're talking about these behaviors that are more externalized. So when we talk about behaviors, we usually talk about them we talk about them in a lot of different ways, but internalized would be more suicidal ideation. I'm feeling depressed. A lot of the things that pull us inward. Externalized behaviors are the ones that we are more readily aware of because they're externalized so that everybody can see them. Everything from yelling, shouting, physical aggression, even things like, poor choices, drag racing down the street, recklessness, right? Things that we can openly see. So when we're dealing with some of these externalized behaviors, they can be a lot. And the hardest part for me as a parent was learning alongside my child to the point that I understood that these externalized behaviors were not something that my child woke up one day and said, I think I'm just going to be a real pain in the ass. And that was hard because I was making meaning in how I understood their world with my own experience growing up, right? If you make a bad choice, you're just being naughty, right? You get punished, all of that jazz. And so the more I started to learn I just realized and was learning that it's more complex than that. So when we talk about behaviors usually manifest for a couple of reasons. They can manifest for a lot of reasons, but it has a lot to do with an unmet need and a skill deficit. So do I not know how to cope? Or is my unmet need something like trauma that has not been dealt with? Is it my mental health I'm not being treated? Is my unmet need, and again, this is connected with trauma, I do not feel safe. All of these things can contribute to behaviors. I think the other piece that was very eye-opening for me and was really helpful in my learning was starting to learn more about emotional regulation. And so keep in mind, yep, I'm a professional. I can look at the professional world and I can unpack all of it for you. I can tell you all of the things about your kid. When it comes to mine, though, it's again, this brain is operating and this turns off. And so I'm not able to access some of that in the ways that I can when it comes to my professional hat. Emotional regulation, when we talk about unmet needs and we talk about skill deficits, is one of the biggest reasons that we continue to see behaviors with kids. The problem is, as adults, we make it even worse because when we say things like, they're just choosing it, you're using your mental health diagnosis as an excuse, you're playing the depression card again. If they're just punished, they'll be better. We do these things and they're not grounded in evidence. We have tons and tons and tons and tons of research that can help us better understand these pieces, but whether it's at the systems level, whether it's at, the individual level, we aren't able to immerse into these best practices. And unfortunately, we do a really crappy job of teaching people this too, right? We're seeing more opportunities within schools and expectations to teach social emotional learning. But then we also have people hijacking these conversations and saying, no, we're not going to teach social emotional learning because it's going to teach all kids to be gay. What? Huh? What? So wait, you're going to deprive me the opportunity as a parent for my kids to get some really awesome skills that all of us should have been having for decades because you have some random like political hijack narrative you're going to take us down? What? Please stop. Because that stuff's dangerous. When it comes to things like social emotional learning, one of the domains of social emotional learning is emotional regulation. These are things that all kids, all adults need to be learning. There was a survey that went around and said 92% of business executives wish that their employees had stronger soft skills. And soft skills, that's another word for social emotional learning, so that they were better at self-awareness, they were better at social awareness, communication, problem solving, emotional regulation. When we don't teach these things, it doesn't just impact our kids, it impacts adults. We literally have like $300 billion being wasted annually because people aren't getting their needs met. And so whether it's mental health, whether it's emotional regulation, whether it's all these pieces are impacting people's ability to function as adults. So when we're talking about kids and emotional regulation, that's super, super important in terms of being successful with your kid. So I want to offer a couple of strategies to help you. And I want to spend a little bit of time on some of the emotional regulation piece because I think that that's really important. And then I'll probably come back to it in another episode too. So the first thing when we're talking about if your child has behaviors, you want to make sure that you have a strong mental health team surrounding you. You want to have a psychiatrist. You want to have a therapist. And you want to also be asking them, what other opportunities or programs are there available to my child? So things like social skills clubs or groups or BHIS. And I know if you're not familiar with BHIS, it's a professional will come to your house, a BHIS worker, and do some home visits, do some social skills stuff. Oftentimes It's only available if your child has Medicaid, but I would say that we're seeing more and more organizations that are getting grants to allow all families to be able to access that. But ask your professionals, what other options for skill instruction, for respite are available for me and my family? I would also encourage, if you are in a state that has a mental health waiver, to sign up for the mental health waiver. Oftentimes wait lists can be years, but that will also afford you some more services and opportunities that you would not get if you are not on the waiver. Your child is not on the waiver. So the next one, first one is have a strong team around you, because navigating these behaviors can be really tough and they can be really complex, and you want to have these professionals weighing in. Along those lines, before I talk about emotional regulation, also make sure you're communicating regularly what's going on with your child. So if your child is having a series of explosive behaviors, or you feel like things are not what the team is aware that they are, they cannot help you if they do not know something is going on. So make sure you keep them in the loop. The next one is emotional regulation. And again, I think I want to, spend more time on this, but it's such a huge, huge, huge thing. When you look at your child, especially having behaviors, the very first thing I want you to do is replace the word behavior, replace the word naughty, replace the word choice, replace all of those, throw them out the window. And I'll tell you why. Because the more we say those, the more we're also wiring our neural pathways to make sense of something that is not accurate. Instead of those, I want you to those words, I want you to replace them with symptoms of dysregulation. So you can say dysregulation or symptoms of something else going on. Emotional regulation is our ability to not just regulate our emotions, but think of yourself like an alternator in a car. So, or a battery, however you want to look at it. If your body has a surge of emotions, feelings, something's happening, you're overwhelmed, it can create a surge in your battery, your alternator. And that surge does not allow for you to function the way you would if it was at an equilibrium. Likewise, if you don't have that surge, you may have something where you're not putting out as much output as you need to function. So emotional regulation is trying to keep it kind of here, right? We want to keep it in the middle. Okay. When we talk about dysregulation, we're not regulated in the middle. We're like, right? We're all over the place. And the one that we see and can be very stressful is the one where it seems dysregulated to the point that we're either getting maladaptive behaviors that are aggressive, or we're getting yelling, verbal aggression, physical aggression, refusals. All of those pieces of the dysregulation can be very, very overwhelming. The part that we have to be careful of too is, though we may be more apt to see the externalized behaviors in dysregulation, we also can have kids that even if they're showing this, they also may be experiencing dysregulation, but more on a depressive side. So they may be internalizing. We have to remember that your kid, my kid, they at no point woke up at 6 years old or 8 years old or 12 years old or 16 years old and said, you know what, I think it'd be really, really damn fun to have depression or bipolar or schizophrenia. I think it'd be a blast to have anxiety and ADHD. They haven't. But what they have done is they have walked a long goddamn journey of doing their best with what they have to regulate themselves, and it's never good enough. And so whether they get in trouble, whether they get yelled at, whether they feel like they're a burden, a lot of our kids that are dysregulated, there's a component of self-worth and self-esteem that is bottom of the barrel. You have to keep in mind when they're dysregulated, and remember, they've been doing it for a hot second, you start to learn survival mechanisms. And sometimes those survival mechanisms are grounded in behaviors that we may not like. For instance, if I have been on this journey as a kid and I have learned, you know what, I'm never going to win. So I might as well just dive in and start to tell the world, F you. Think about it if you're driving in a car. Imagine you're heading down the freeway and somebody cuts you off and you get mad, right? And they get mad and then they go away and you keep going. Imagine though, if all day, every day, people are constantly cutting you off. It gets exhausting. And so while you may try to use the little regulation that you have, eventually it's like, F this, you know, I'm way up here all of the time. And so I just learn skills that help me get by, whether they're good, bad, or otherwise. My brain will allow me to engage in survival mechanisms, coping mechanisms, substance abuse, pot, all sorts of drugs, booze, alcohol, self-harm, sex, gambling, all of these things I will learn to help me get by. So when we think about our kids and they may be showing us this whole facade, think of it when I'm training people, I like to use the iceberg picture. Think of it as an iceberg too. At the top of the iceberg, you just see the top of the iceberg, but there are literally miles and miles and miles of things going on underneath. And quite honestly, it's very sad. It's incredibly heartbreaking. And for me as a parent, that was talk about grief and emotion. Because when the shit hits the fan, especially as your kids get older and the issues become more serious, and your child may have had suicide attempts or overdoses, and you're sitting in a hospital and you're realizing that the world as you thought you knew it is nothing like it actually was. And then as a parent, you might find yourself grappling with some guilt. Like, I feel like a shithead that I was trying to go down this path with it, but really it's all of the rest of this. So that child that may be in emotional dysregulation, they may have shitty ass behaviors and they may be directed 100% at you, because remember, you're safe. And when we're with people, things, places that we feel safe, we're more apt to allow ourselves to get into an emotional dysregulation because it feels safe too. It's my way of letting it all out, right? No matter how hard it is on the person that's having to receive it. So when you're thinking about, or when you're dealing with the emotional dysregulation or these behaviors of your child, replace it with the word dysregulation or symptom of something else going on. The reason you do that is that starts to change how we address it. I know a lot of us were raised with a very punitive response. If somebody does something, you ground them, right? Or you discipline in some way, shape, or form. First, I'd encourage you to work with your therapeutic team, because your child is complex with a lot of layers. And I'm not advocating against consequences, but I'm saying consequences need to match and be appropriate, especially the natural consequences of types, to whatever's going on. So you were drag racing down the street. That's really not safe. I love you too much to allow you to, be in danger. So we're going to take a break from the car for a while. Versus, you were drag racing down the street. I'm grounding you for 4 years. You can't leave your room, talk to a soul, things that, are not in alignment with each other. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind as your child is engaging in dysregulation is getting to the core of why, what dysregulated us, but skills. So instead of that punitive approach, we don't want to miss an opportunity for learning, because in the short term, punitive will work out of fear-based, but in the long run, you have missed so many opportunities to teach and embed critical skills in your child's skill set that they're going to need next week, next year, next, decades from now to be a happy, healthy, functional adult. And that's one of the things that I think we really drop the ball in terms of our systems, whether it's mental health systems, school systems, I'm a special ed professor working with, special ed teachers and other teachers. And we really have a long ways to go in terms of even adequately preparing our teachers to teach some of these high level skills. Your child needs to know first how to identify feelings. You may be shocked that if you gave your child, and you can do this, like buy some feelings cards and say, what feeling is this? You may be shocked that your child cannot adequately describe feelings, and they may be able to tell you basic feelings: sad, mad, scared, happy, glad, right? But if you grab a feelings wheel, and I'll try to remember to throw that link in here too, you want them to start to expand the repertoire of feelings, because it turns out not everything in life is just sad, happy, mad, right? There's more to it. And we want them to be able to start to dig a little deeper to feelings, because you cannot regulate feelings if you cannot identify them. You have to be able to identify them, to start to understand them, to learn how to manage them, to be able to, with automaticity, regulate them. So if you're looking for, all right, I'm ready to start teaching my child, one, we have a free class. It's called Calming the Storm. And I talk a little bit more about emotional regulation, but identifying feelings in order to start to understand them, having conversations with your child, modeling. This is, I'm feeling so stressed right now. Our dog just ran away and I had to chase down the street. Can I just have a couple of minutes? I need to breathe. You want to breathe with me, right? This modeling stuff is going to go a long ways, because remember, you are your child's your role model, favorite person. Even when they're yelling at you, they love you more than they'll tell you. Okay. So emotional regulation is a big one. The next one we're talking about behaviors is understanding why. And we started to talk about that with emotional regulation, but typically there's two major areas when we're talking about, we call it the function of behavior. Why are we seeing behavior? There's more functions, but for a lot of us, it has to do with two reasons. One is our child is trying to get attention. They're trying to gain something, or the opposite. They're trying to escape from something. They want to avoid something. Another function also can be sensory dysregulation too, and that's very common, especially with our kids on the spectrums, kids with sensory processing disorders. So I don't want to leave that one out. Again, the calming class, the Calming the Storm class I talked about, I go into these a little bit more in depth. But when we talk about function, it's really important to understand the why of behavior, because sometimes, for instance, if I notice that every morning my child is throwing a fit about going to school, they do not want to go to school. If I start to, instead of just taking the behavior at face value, if I start to dive a little deeper and have conversations with them to understand why, I may learn that there's some bullying going on at school and they don't want to go because they don't know how to handle that. And so as the parent, whether it's educators or parents, when we start to know what the why is, we're able to help sometimes remove triggers. We're able to help skill building. We're able to help set them up and create a system for them to be successful. So whether we're increasing reinforcement, like you go today and do X, Y, and Z if this bullying situation happens. And then when you come home tonight, we are going to, have a game night, or they're identifying those triggers and understanding the why is super, super critical, because whether our kids are trying to get attention and we want to set up a situation where you can get my attention if you do what you need to, or if they're trying to avoid something, hey, I understand it's very stressful. We still want to embed some skills though to help them cope with that stress, and then we can reward that. And sometimes when we say reward, people go, well, I don't need to, I'm not going to reward something for something they're supposed to do. In actuality though, if you go to your job all day, every day, are you going just because you're a good person? Because you really should, it's what you should do. Or are you going because you get a paycheck? Adults, again, we chain meeting to what we think, how we're making sense of the world, but it's not actually always accurate. So if a child's trying to escape something and we say, hey, you stay in it, you use those skills, then tonight you and I can play a game or we can do whatever. It doesn't have to be a cost something reward or reinforcement, but we want to increase the likelihood of it happening again. And that's what we call positive reinforcement, where we're adding something to increase the likelihood of it happening again, just like you go to work, so you get your paycheck. I'm guessing you're not going to show up at work if it's a volunteer gig, because you need that money to survive too, just like your child needs that reinforcement to learn the skills. It's more important to you that they learn those skills to thrive than if they don't. Creating a plan, a supportive plan, and I kind of talked about this earlier. It's really important that we want to be intentional with our children, working with their therapeutic team, working with their educational team. We want team involvement here. What does that child need to be successful? So identifying the function, but then also making sure that we have a predictable plan. If this happens, we'll do this. If this happens, we'll do this. And then prevention. What are the things that we need to put into place? Skill building, reinforcement that will help reduce the likelihood of seeing some of those behaviors, AKA what we're calling symptoms and dysregulation. And then skill instruction. So skill instruction is one of the most crucial. So this is my number 5. Making sure that we're building in intentional opportunities for direct instruction of those skills. So as a parent, just because your child may see you performing some of those skills with proficiency, do not assume that your child is going to be able to just learn those skills by watching you. We assume a lot of times that just because our kids coexist with, whether it's teachers or parents or others, that they will be able to pick up on those skills, and that just isn't the case. We need to be offering direct instruction. And the way that looks is I'm going to offer a step-by-step. So for when I'm teaching teachers this, if you have a child that wants to blurt out, I'm going to pull them aside. I'm not doing it in front of everybody. And I'm going to say, okay, I love that you have great thoughts, but I don't want to miss what you're saying. And I don't want others to miss what I'm saying. So let's do this. And I give them a step-by-step. I'm going to sit on my bottom of my chair. I'm going to, as soon as I have my thought, it's going to trigger my hand to go in the air. And even though I know what I say has to be really good, I have to keep a quiet mouth while my hand is up. And then I wait for myself to be called on. And then after I do the step-by-step, I model. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. You pretend to be the teacher. And then I raise my hand, and I'm even teaching that child, okay, you be the teacher. And then as soon as I do it, you tell me what a great job I'm doing. Okay. And then we do that. And then we roll reverse, and then they do it. And I make a huge deal. Oh my gosh, you are the best hand raiser on the planet. Because the bigger the deal I make of it, the more I reinforce that, I'm going to increase the likelihood of them doing it. Teaching this skill so that just like I'm teaching math or reading or anything else as a parent, as an educator, as a community org, whoever, is going to increase the likelihood that they do it. But I'm also giving the roadmap. What do you do in this situation instead of assuming they already have it? And then the last piece is that reinforcement. So my 6th skill to you is applying that positive reinforcement. Negative means we're taking something away. Positive means we're adding something. So positive reinforcement means I don't want to just go, good job, good job, good job, right? So like authentic praise. I love how you sat there, or even fist bumps, high fives. There's a lot of different ways that I could layer in positive reinforcement, but those kids that are struggling with behaviors, they really need it every 1 to 3 minutes. So if you have a child at home that's maybe argumentative a lot. And a lot of us get that, whether our child has a mental health issue or not. You want to be going out of your way to capture everything they're doing well long before any issues happen. I love, Johnny, thank you so much. I love that I just came in and the house is clean. I love how quietly you're sitting. Thank you so much for doing X, Y, and Z. That was a really good, insightful thing. I am so proud of you for sharing that. Thanks for telling me how you feel. All of these things, I want to, especially anytime I have to redirect my child, I want to have 10 of the positives, because what you're going to start to see is a shift in the behavior. If the only thing my child is getting from me is redirection, correction, reprimands, punitive, I'm going to start to alter the homeostasis of that relationship too, right? Because what I'm going to be doing is teaching the child that the only way we're interacting is with conflict. The scary part about that isn't just what you might see with increased aggression, it's also what's going on underneath. So our kids' dysregulation, we talked about this earlier, the journey that they're on isn't just the externalized behaviors. It's that feeling a lack of self-worth. My parents don't love me. I'm a burden to them. I'm exhausted by constantly fighting with them. I should just walk away from this life. So we have to remember that while your child may be showing one face to you, they do love you, they do care about you. But when the battle starts to, especially as they start to get older, starts to become so much, so hard, so heavy. My parents hate me, step parents hate me. I've created all this conflict. They start to create sometimes these narratives too, and a lot of it is rooted in this lack of self-worth, because when you've been on this journey your whole life, it doesn't feel like it's actually ever going to get better. And again, if I don't have the skills to tell you, I'm really dysregulated today, and instead of acting aggressive, I thought I would have a conversation with you. If you expect your child to do that, they most likely don't have the skills to do that. So they'll be communicating with you. It just won't be in ways that you like. It might be a fuck you. It might be I hate you. I'm moving out, or it may be with substances, all these dangerous pieces. So what as parents, what we need to make sure that we're doing is trying to flip that. We want to flip that narrative. High levels of prevention, because we don't want our child to get into that spot. So everything from going back to the beginning, 6 steps, having a strong mental health team. So your psych, having your therapist, having people that can help support you in this journey and what your child needs. Emotional regulation. So replace instead of behaviors, naughty kid, choice, all of that, with symptoms, dysregulation. Okay. The third one was functions. So is my child trying to get out of something, or are they trying to get attention? And sometimes it can be both, but usually it starts with one. Once we know that, we can create a plan. What's our plan of action? That plan of action has to have some skill instruction, and it also has to have high levels of reinforcement. So proud of you, because that kid that is feeling like they don't like themselves, if we're always just yelling at them, we decrease the likelihood that they're going to share what's going on, that we'll be able to dive to the why, and then we'll be able to intervene and make sure that we're getting them the help. We can't do that if we have totally fractured that relationship with them. And I know it's hard. Parents, trust me, I've been there, live it, continue to. It is freaking hard. But I also promise you that it gets better. And I never share anything that I don't walk myself and that I don't see success with. That doesn't make it easy though. Okay. So then I should say the 7th thing is make sure you're taking care of yourself first. Mad props to all parents. If there's ever anything I can do to support you, please reach out. Don't forget, we've got the Learning Lab. I would love to see you in there. High quality learning, community that cares and absolutely gets it, resource share, and a class for you as parents on your own healing journey. So if there's ever anything I can do, reach out. Otherwise, have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Hey, if you like what you heard, do me a little favor and hit that subscribe button, then make sure you share it with all your friends.